Well, I've started over the last week to talk to an extensive number of people over the phone, and they would run the gamut of people from prominent labor leaders to prominent business leaders to nonprofit leaders to people in the sports business to past leaders of our community. And I've been talking to many, many of those. I've begun a series of slightly more formal meetings, but I say slightly more formal just in the sense that it's a group of people gathered around the table. I met yesterday, for example, with a group of young leaders from the community. I will be meeting with a group of leaders from the labor movement. I will be meeting with a group of business people for dinner this week. So I am doing what I said I would do. I'm talking, of course, to members of the City Council and will continue to do so. So it is my hope to both have all those conversations and at the same time to do the other thing I said I would do, which is collect information from a wide variety of sources, including cities which have had the Olympics in the past, cities which have bid on the Olympics, people from the Olympic movement, to get their views with respect to what's involved in a bid, whether the rules have changed for real, and all this kind of thing. And so I hope to be in a position as best one could with 3 or 4 weeks in total to have a reasonably complete summary of all that information at my disposal when it comes time to make the decision as to whether to submit a letter or not. On the first part of the question, obviously I'm very much influenced by the comments that I receive either personally or even when I see them through the media of members of City Council. And look, the concerns about finance are on my mind too. That's why I'm not just sort of blithely saying, well, let's just sign a letter and go ahead with this. I want to be careful about this and make sure that whatever decision we make is a decision that's viable for the city, that's in the best interest of the city, and that will provide a net benefit to the city. And so obviously their comments are extremely important. And I've also said, as you know, that ultimately the City Council would have to approve a bid. Whether if we sent in a letter saying we were interested, the final decision on putting in a bid would have to be approved by the City Council. So it's obviously on my radar screen to be seeing and trying to determine through conversation, whether there's support for that or not. So it's a very important factor in my mind. With respect to the second question, I've had one discussion with the Premier about this on what I'll call a preliminary basis. I have had a previous discussion actually before the Pan Am Games with the Prime Minister about these multinational sporting events. I haven't had a conversation. I mean, there was a passing mention of it at the opening of the Pan Am Games when we saw each other, but I have not had a more formal conversation with him. But I would intend to talk to the leaders of the parties, plural, federally, because I think given the circumstance we have here where this letter would be due if there's one to be sent in before the election is held, that I would talk to the leaders of the three parties, again, to gauge their opinions, because obviously, their opinions are going to be very important, the leaders of all these governments and political parties, to the viability of anything we would do. Well, I think it would be premature for me to make any declarations on their behalf or to even sort of give you a summary of what was a very initial conversation I had with the Premier. So I will be happy to report to you when I formally sort of report on what we're going to do vis-a-vis this letter. Let's also remember something else. The letter is not the submission of a bid. Even if one submitted the letter, there would be lots of work to do in terms of nailing down a lot of the documentation that has to be in place in a formal way in order to have a bid go forward. And that's also added to that, of course, is what I mentioned earlier, which is the approval of the City Council. And so the letter is what it is. It's an expression of interest in bidding. And while other cities have put out books and various other documents that are at a different stage in the process, in our case, we would have lots of work to do. But I will obviously consult and include in my own report to you what the other governments have said vis-a-vis even putting in this letter when the time comes.